There we go. And we do this. Welcome to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7, here in Lansing, Michigan. This is Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill. Our Monday night Gab Fest here on in the basement of Lansing Community College. Good to see you, Bill. You
Good evening.
Melt on the way over tonight. It's much better.
Much better. Now, I saw some people going to Comic-Con, I thought they're going to be really uncomfortable out there for 4 hours, 5 hours.
I thought about that, and it gets dusty. There has been no rain to keep the dust down. We were conferring. We got our 15 minutes the other day, and then you said you got about 15 minutes.
We got our 15 minutes of fame today.
Yeah. Not enough to recharge the water system, I'm sure.
No, it looked like steam coming off the pavement. That was it.
I'm actually kind of worried. Those of us who have wells start to think about, I have to keep watering that hoop house in order to keep those plants alive, and keep wondering about how much water is there really down there, and is the recharge really going to work? We are the first generation in the history of the world to now be into deficit water. We are no longer restoring back to, the deep aquifers are what we're really getting into, and once you remove the water from the deep aquifers, those don't recharge. So we're really literally playing with fire. We've watched those fires out west. We've watched the shortage of rain here in the Midwest. The corn is dying. My husband's family up in Illinois, they send pictures every day that shows more and more of the corn dying. They think the only crop they'll get this year is the winter wheat they got off in the spring. That's going to be it. Everything else is going to be gone. This is a really bad harbinger of what's yet to come.
And we're going to see it in the grocery store, obviously.
Absolutely.
We're definitely going to see price increases. I think I'll have to become a vegetarian, but maybe being a vegetarian won't be cheaper next year.
One of the things I did want to talk about tonight is, I don't know if you're aware of the fact the Farm Bill is about to go through. It is a disaster as predicted, and we won't go into all the details of that, but Monsanto is trying to squeak something through at the last minute. It's called the Monsanto Rider. They got upset last year when they were trying to introduce their GMO alfalfa. And there was a move that the courts put a quash on that and said, well, not until you do an environmental impact statement in order to make sure that the drift from the new variety of genetically modified crop doesn't go over and contaminate other crops. Because Monsanto has always argued that the drift is never more than 6 feet, which is wildly ridiculous. We're joined by Todd Hayward, who has strong opinions on this too. And so they were annoyed to find that a court could actually come in and halt this. So the Monsanto Rider says that they would still be allowed to plant GMO crops even if a court halts and says that you have.
How high of court?
I know. First of all, I didn't know that you could just decide to sort of preemptively write a law that says the courts have no ability to issue an injunction against you. And
they're just exerting their personal civil liberties as human beings or as persons.
Now, see, that's one group I would have liked to kill in the world.
I don't know about killing part, but yeah.
I don't know where they gestated, but I thought maybe we could have gotten them before they got loose in the
That would have been nice. They are definitely endangering us, I think, in many, 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 many ways.
Industrial ag poses a real threat to the world, and I think the irony is, of course, they keep saying, without us, we will not be able to feed the world. And my argument is, with you, we won't be able to feed the world. We have removed so much land, so much of the best farmland has literally gone under asphalt for development. We have not found a good economically viable model for small, sustainable farms, and the new Farm Bill will do nothing to alter that, which they really should do.
In fact, the version that the House passed this evening actually is going to cut funding for low-income youth to have access to free lunches.
Oh, absolutely.
Starve them.
Yeah,
That's a great idea. Starve them.
So
they won't complain as much.
That's right.
My sister is raising money right now for a program in Grand Ledge called Blessings in a Backpack, which is food over the weekend, because what we see is 40% of the kids, even in an affluent community like Grand Rapids, are on the subsidized lunches because they would, they qualify, they're low-income kids. And on the weekend, it's difficult for them because without school, they don't eat very well. And the the money doesn't last as long as the necessity of feeding you over the weekend. So they would send these kids home with a backpack full of food every week. It's a tough sell though in this era. It's surprising to me, but a lot of people still think that there's too many food stamps out there. They're cutting the food stamps in the new USDA budget.
Well, and I just found out that the Red Cross, American Red Cross here in Michigan, is closing down its food bank.
Really?
Yeah, I talked to one of the workers who, effective Friday, no longer has a job because they're shutting it down, and it's one of the things that the Red Cross does that isn't specific to its core job,
core mission.
And so they're sending it off, letting other people pick it up, which is really troubling to me.
Is that because of their desire to say that in order to pay people, because of the strike?
Oh, I think it was definitely motivated as a way to drive at the current union battles that are going on there. But the Mid-Michigan Food Bank is really the only food bank that the Red Cross runs.
Well, that's
which to me would have meant you keep it, not get rid of it. If it's that unique, then you maintain it. And I know that food bank has been really important in subsidizing many of the other food banks, such as the neighborhood food bank that travels to various churches around the area that the city puts out, the Lansing Area AIDS Network food pantry.
Doesn't speak well of the Red Cross to me. They have such a PR problem over the years because of things that they've done in the past and the high rate of pay for their national executives that you think that they would be. But I guess they think they're saying to the public, well, gee, we just can't afford to run everything.
That's sort of it. That's the message. Although obviously it hasn't, nobody's paying attention because it hasn't been reported anywhere. If the look on your face said it all.
Well, that's another big issue in town, isn't it? We were talking the other day. How do we figure out which stories get covered and which don't? Todd, you've been a journalist in this town for a long time. Because Bill was talking about it. What happened out at your house? You had that neighbor, the situation.
Oh, we had a 5-hour police standoff.
Yeah.
It happened on a weekend at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so there's nobody working. So there's no news.
Right.
It just doesn't matter.
And it doesn't, yeah.
And then when they finally did send TV coverage, we sent somebody who was inexperienced.
The weekend intern.
Who had to hold the mic. Can you hold the mic for us?
Yeah.
And just, it was terrible. It was really awful.
Oh, that's too bad.
And I think that's unfortunately where mid and low market television is going right now, is you've got to be the one-man band. You've got to be able to shoot your own stuff, edit your own stuff, do your own interviews. And it's a cost-saving measure, but to what point is it damaging news gathering? I still have a great deal of respect for Channel 6. I think they do a pretty good job under the leadership of Jan Sardar, who, as you know, is a really good friend of mine.
Yeah.
But he has really committed them to doing investigative stuff, to doing more in-depth reporting. And he doesn't stick to it's got to be no more than 2 minutes context.
Yeah.
He says however long it takes to tell the story is however long it takes to tell the story. And that's why they did a phenomenal series a couple of years ago about heroin addiction in DeWitt, which is a huge problem in DeWitt, but nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And they did this just fantastic series that was, I think it was almost 12 minutes, 13 minutes, which is an unheard of commitment of resources.
On local TV it is.
And local television. And
they do a good job online too, which I think is a real difference. A lot of times if they can't get a reporter out there and so forth, at least people in the community can post on Facebook and keep people updated about what's happening in the neighborhood. So that's a useful resource.
And I do see their producers also doing something that personally I find a little irritating, because I listen to scanners and I know how often scanners can have the wrong information out there.
Yes.
But listening to the scanners, and they're posting stuff directly off of the scanner about what's happening somewhere. And that's not news gathering. That's not even really news reporting. And my concern is, particularly when you have a violent situation, such as a couple of months ago, you had the former student at Da Vinci down in Jackson who showed up with a gun. They were reporting based on the scanner traffic that the student had entered the school and had barricaded themselves in the building. That's a really terrifying thing to see and read if you're a parent of
I don't
a kid
have
in
a
that
problem
school.
with that though, because I think people can go straight to the scanner. So what's the difference?
Well, but they weren't saying it's on the scanner.
Reporting it as news.
Yeah. So and if they said, the scanner says, and by the way, and I think that's the other thing that we have to remind people of too, is that scanners are not what's being said over the scanner is not 100%
Right.
accurate.
Oh, yeah.
That
Eyewitnesses are the worst kinds of reporters.
and reporters have an obligation to double check that. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. And I see more and more repackaging of press releases happening, not just in television, but in print. And the new thing is the outsourcing of writing of obituaries and other news pieces to countries like India and Southeast Asia.
Absolutely.
And it's running in the New York Times and the
Yeah.
Chicago Tribune as content created and delivered by American workers.
I forgot what the name of the corporation is, but they found that they were actually posting things under false bylines recently because they really don't want you to know that it's somebody in India that's posting this, so they invent Fred Jones and put up
and that's
by Fred Jones.
That's a really frightening trend as well.
It is.
Well, think about, I'm often comparing Lansing and Ann Arbor, as much as we complain about Lansing's media. Ann Arbor does not have a television station.
Right,
and they're stuck to the Detroit media, which doesn't care
cover
about them unless there's an explosion.
And I'm not sure AnnArbor.com qualifies as a newspaper.
No, and they've got really WUOM for radio. After that, there really is nothing.
Isn't that odd?
It sure is. This is the same size city as Lansing, almost identical in size.
It's amazing.
Not one television station there because Detroit. You're right. It has to be a mass murder before they come.
Well, and that's actually the way that.
So keep that in mind if you want coverage.
Yeah. If you want coverage, go to Ann Arbor. But the reality is that that's the way that the arbitrage markets have created Ann Arbor as a market.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Ann Arbor would probably be better served being put in the Lansing market than in the Detroit market.
Yes, I think so.
And there's a battle actually going on between Detroit market and Mid-Michigan market over Livingston County.
Oh, very popular.
Yes.
Because it's the up and coming money place. That's where a lot of the advertising cash is coming from. So there's a lot of fighting going on about who gets to cover Livingston County as a reporter.
Very interesting to watch what's happening with the media wars nowadays. And MLive moving into the Lansing market here, and sort of the tensions with the Journal, and the Journal going behind a paywall.
I got to tell you, I think MLive, I can't sing Angela Whitrock's praises more highly. I think she's probably one of the hardest working reporters we've got.
I don't know how they post so much. They're working hard.
Yeah, and she is on top of it, and she's in it. I mean, her coverage of the casino issue, her coverage of city council, her coverage of the budget, just phenomenal reporting, real gumshoe reporting, the sort of stuff that I wish we saw in the Lansing State Journal.
I'm just surprised, though, that the Journal is the test market for the paywall here in the area for the Gannett Corporation, and it just struck me as so strange that they would try a paywall at a time when they have a major new competitor coming on board, like MLive, that's really being very aggressive with its coverage and really getting a lot of information out there and building an audience very quickly. Yeah. I think that's a very strange move. I'd be surprised if it's working out.
I can't imagine it was. I mean, I know that Kathleen Levy had a phenomenal story about the forest fires in the UP, sort of bringing us back around to climate issues, yesterday in the Journal, and I still haven't read it because I've already used up my free allotments.
3 minutes, yeah.
One of the clues I have is that, they now do their commenting on Facebook so they get rid of some of the trolls. But clearly there's a lot of stories that have 0 comments, and that's an indicator that people aren't really tapping in.
Yeah, I agree. Although, I mean, there are some topics. One of the things that we've discovered about HIV stuff is people are still so worried about being attached to HIV in the social media world even, that they won't share it on their Facebook page or their Twitter or whatnot. They'll copy and paste it into an email and send the whole story to their email lists of people that they feel safe talking about HIV with. So we discovered this when I went to the National Minority AIDS Council conference in Chicago in November, where it was like I was a rock star. I mean, if you looked at my traffic on my stories, you would not indicate that there were thousands of people around the country who were reading the work that I was creating. Yet wherever I went in this conference, it was like, Todd Haywood, it was kind of creepy, to be honest with you. And it didn't help that you had to have your name badge out so you couldn't hide. I mean, I would have rather have hidden my name tag. But that was really the eye-opener. That's when we realized that the market is there, but it's a very different market.
And that's a problem for the necessity of having an ad by the click, because you're not getting the clicks, therefore you're not getting paid for those. That's always a challenge. I mean, we have not really worked out yet all of the kinks in the new model, and that's part of the challenge. We'll see how
that's part of the excitement too.
It is. I think there are actually a lot more opportunities that people aren't looking at, selling your expertise. I see a lot more corporations now that will come in and consult with you on getting your message out, that kind of thing, with skills and trainings. We'll see what that does. You're listening to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Bill, one of the things, before I forget about it, is there is an author coming in that you wanted some of our listeners to know about.
Yes, indeed. James Rollins. And people who read thrillers will understand who he is and know who he is. He's probably one of the predominant writers of that genre today. And he writes thrillers that tend to be in foreign countries. There's always, of course, this James Bond style anti-organization working against him. But he's a very clever writer. And he's a veterinarian, which is unusual. He's still a practicing veterinarian, probably less than he was because he's published 25 books. But he grew up on pulp magazines. So basically, these are giant pulp magazines. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of blood, naturally.
Yeah.
But what was his name again? Blood.
Yeah. James Rollins. And I think people will enjoy him because he's very thoughtful in how he creates books. He's a very clever writer. And
where he's going to be and when?
He's going to be at Schuler's in Okemos Monday, July 16th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And I think, he wasn't trained naturally to be a writer, obviously. I mean, he didn't go to writing school. He was a veterinarian. He treated parakeets and dogs, he said.
Parakeets?
California.
I was going to say, there's not much of a parakeet market.
California, I asked him, because exotics. California.
There's that wonderful documentary that I watched, though, the parakeets of Telegraph Hill. Just a wonderful documentary. I showed it to one of my honors classes once, and they really appreciated it as well. There are quite a few parakeets.
I saw a parakeet in our neighborhood recently loose.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, probably it's not going to make it through the winter.
Probably won't make it to the winter, actually.
Yeah, get eaten.
The diseases that are out.
They're not.
Psittacosis, which is a bacterial infection, tends to take birds out pretty quickly, particularly when they don't have an immunity to it.
And humans can get that as well. I know my sister has psittacosis. It was a bit surprising if we found out it was from the parakeet.
Parrot fever.
Parrot fever, yes.
That's exactly what it's called.
Yes. All these nice tropical diseases we can look forward to.
Sturdy creatures.
Keep it in mind now that we're not going to have any more winters. Maybe we'll just be able to overwinter all those parakeets.
Well, I'm starting to see quite a few Baltimore Orioles, which you would never see in Michigan. I mean, you'd see them sometimes, but now they're pretty frequent.
Yeah.
I must admit, I had one eye open in the middle of the night because I did the TV on HBO, had on a movie called The Big Year with Owen Wilson and Jack Black, and it's all about birding.
It's a funny
movie.
It's hilarious. I never in my life thought I would watch that.
I know, me neither.
I watched it with my 11-year-old grandson, and we were just guffawing constantly. It was hilarious.
Steve Martin's in it. It's hysterical.
And that's kind of accurate. I know some birders.
Oh, do you? I know.
They're pretty intense.
My grandfather was a birder.
Yeah, it was quite fascinating, and I learned a lot about birds, and I really appreciated it, and I thought, So I was all set up for, quirky movies I love, and I was able last night to finally see Moonrise Kingdom, the latest Wes Anderson film, and I am a big Wes Anderson fan. It was fabulous. It was just fabulous. It's about two little kids that love each other and literally run away together, and all the...
They're like 11 or 12.
Very young, 12, and both of them are just, one's an orphan and the other one is supposedly a troubled child. And she finds the book Mom stashed on the refrigerator, How to Raise the Troubled Child, and she feels bad because she knows it's me. And it's just charming, and it's so edifying. And at the end, I'm not much of a crier. Unless it's Old Yeller, that's about the only one that gets me. I cried at the end of this movie. It was so sweet. And what I love about Wes Anderson films is they're quirky as hell, but there is no irony at all. I mean, it is not, there's no cynicism, there's no irony. It's just, sweet, strange people leading.
The trailers for it made it look great.
Did they?
Yes.
I haven't seen the trailers, but I had to.
See, now I might have to go see it. Anything that makes Bonnie Buckaroo
cry.
It has to be an incredibly powerful film.
Must admit, I'm teaching this creativity course, and I'm looking for all sorts of interesting things to put in the online class, and I found a psychology test the other day. They said that they've been gathering data since 1970, and they put it online. 10 or 15 years ago. Everybody fills it out. And they've been adding to the database. So I thought, well, this might be fun, because it's always fun to find out what kind of person you are. And it said that I was both closed-minded and disagreeable. And I thought, even though it's accurate,
I don't want to know this.
I don't want to know this, so I'm not going to give it to myself. Too bad. No DD screen for you.
Let's see. She's both closed-minded,
Closed-minded
and disagreeable.
and disagreeable. Yeah,
And proves it with one test. Thank you for playing.
I thought that was kind of fun. And apparently, they measure other things. They decided that in my case, they were so irrelevant. They don't even bother to tell you what those might be. And they don't tell you up front what they're testing for.
Oh,
But I didn't know that it was open-mindedness and agreeableness, apparently, and I fell short on both scales.
I just can't imagine that.
I can't. Oh, what a shock, right? Yeah.
Well, the open-mindedness part, I would disagree with the closed-minded.
me too.
Disagreeable.
But
will
the
go for it.
disagreeable, yeah. You're
that's
curmudgeonly.
No
That's kind of
kidding.
fun.
But I kind of like it. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of entertaining.
I do wear it as a badge of honor. Speaking of curmudgeons, John Roberts, our U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice, is earning himself quite a reputation these days, and there's a lot of speculation about. My theory is that he's just really cynical, and he gave one for the team, so the Supreme Court looks good, and he'll be high-minded, and now he's just there's gonna be a whole bunch of decisions we're just gonna freak out about. He has just given one to us in order to sort of prove that he's high-minded, and that he switched because he knew that if this Supreme Court, I think, would have been in real trouble if they had had a very nasty put down of the major legislation that took 18 months to get that passed.
I think there would have been, but I personally, I think that John Roberts, because there is now indication that he participated in writing both opinions, which is very uncommon.
Oh yeah, he did write both. He was writing what he thought would be the majority, and then changed his mind.
And I think that actually may indicate that perhaps the arguments won the day in his mind. I want to give him some credit. I want to try and give some credit here. I mean, at least it's not the right wing running around saying that he did it because he's an epileptic, which is the big argument.
Because of the meds he's on, that he's basically a druggie.
Because, he doesn't have lifetime health care as a federal judge for the rest of his life. I mean, it just, the ridiculousness of the right when the ruling came down, it has to go down, I think, in American history as some of the most ridiculous stuff ever.
They were really grasping.
I mean, I can't believe that this socialism has passed. I'm going to move to Canada.
Right,
Yeah,
to get away from socialized medicine.
That's right, because there isn't any socialized medicine in Canada except for all of it.
And remember, Rush Limbaugh
where's
was going to go to Costa Rica, which has it as well.
Although Bill O'Reilly came almost to the point of apologizing and admitting that he was wrong. He didn't do it.
He pulled back. But
he came right up to the edge. It was kind of nice to see. It was painful because it was clearly against his entire makeup.
I'm worried, though, that the Roberts decision isn't as sanguine as we might suspect, because the decision that he really upheld in terms of the Commerce Clause basically says no more New Deal.
Yeah.
I mean, the New Deal legislation that FDR passed was all really based on the Commerce Clause. Yeah. And the idea that you couldn't attach any kind of requirements to the states, take our money and you must do this. That's what was behind things like Title IX. You don't get your funding unless you follow our dictates. And now it's looking like that's no longer going to be the case in terms of Supreme Court doctrine. That's very worrisome.
That's very troublesome. I also think there's some troublesome context in calling this a tax instead of relying fully on the Commerce Clause decision. Yeah. I think that's going to hurt Obama politically.
I don't think it hurt the people that weren't already against it.
No, but I think it's going to motivate people because
they are motivated.
Yes, but
what more would it take? They're already jumping up and down and lining up out in front of the polling booths.
Well, the Tea Party people, held a burning of the American Care Act in hell. Originally, it was planned as a celebration of the end of the Care Act, Affordable Care Act, but now it's protested, and they've been very clear that Obama clearly lied to us because he said it wasn't a tax, and here the Supreme Court says it's a tax. Well, what most people don't know is that the idea of tax as applied to this argument, covers penalty, but was not put forward by the federal government in its defense.
Right,
it was put forward in an amicus brief.
Right.
And clearly the majority found that and went, let's latch onto that.
Oh, well,
and
no,
pulled it
Roberts
out.
was the only one that wanted it. The other opinions do not reflect that as the decision because he got his nice 5-4 majority, but only because he came over on that side, but the Ginsburg didn't.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the political process. I do think it will hurt Obama at the polls. I think the Tea Party, and I know I keep getting poo-pooed whenever I talk about the Tea Party as a force. I'm telling you, they are a threat.
They are, but I mean, I don't think they're any larger than they ever were. I don't think their numbers are growing anymore as a result of this decision. They're just more rabid, and they were already rabid to begin with. I mean,
But I
They're going
think
to put more money in the secret PACs.
yeah.
right, that could well be, but we did see yesterday that Mr. Romney was busy, and he has this coke problem, as the protesters say. He was down visiting with his Koch brother pals. It's getting to the point now that I really think I do agree with some of the people, even Ann Coulter, who had argued, that Mitt Romney is probably the weakest candidate they could put up. If they did have a strong candidate, I do think Obama would be in more trouble. But I'll tell you quite honestly, the idea that all of his money is offshore in these various Cayman accounts and so forth. And he keeps saying, but I didn't make a dime by doing that. Well, you know what? If you didn't make a dime by doing that, then why did you do that? Why wouldn't you keep your money in an American bank? It's because you did indeed save tax money.
Well, it's because he needed to take Ann's $77,000 in dressage tax savings and put them in a place where they couldn't be taxed again.
Yes.
The average American is busy paying for dressage lessons and dressage for their horses all the time.
She gets a tax write-off of $77 grand on that horse. Rapalka.
Why?
I know. How has that become a tax write-off?
Why?
And what I loved was the picture that I reposted on Facebook that shows a horse strapped to a 747.
Yeah.
And it says, "This is how the horse is going to get to the liver." The irony, of course, is that he'll probably lose the election mostly because of the dog on the roof.
Let us hope. If people know nothing else but that, perhaps that will help. Although we should probably get the cat vote in there and start something.
I don't know. That cat vote's strange. Those are the folks who stay home.
It's because they can't leave their 20,000 cats.
Too many cats, yeah. Or hoarding cats. Cat hoarders.
The kitty ladies.
There is, I must admit.
Every town has one, or several.
One? Actually, it's about one every block. Having worked in the humane industry, believe me, it's one every block.
I had 17 cats and 7 dogs in a trailer once. So I was, and you know what? I was very lucky. They hadn't invented the term hoarding yet. So I was just the strange young lady down the road where if you had a stray animal, you always threw it in my place. Those were all strays that people gave me. They were
a lot of cats.
Terrible.
Yeah, but you.
If I was short on cat food, trust me, I didn't want to go in. I went to the store and got the cat food because you'd see all those eyes waiting for. Ooh, not good.
But you took care of them, which is the difference I think between hoarders and sort of collectors.
But I was on the edge of being unable to. You can get to the point where you have so many pets that you have to take a night job at Clark Station to buy cat food.
I have a friend whose daughter is a vet who's a
budding cat hoarder.
No, not budding.
Oh, not budding.
Yeah. Not good.
But she's in the right field.
Yeah, but
she can take care of them.
Can you take care of 100 animals?
Did you read that incredible story about the bunny hoarder?
No, I might think I missed it.
And she'd actually gotten so bad that she had done time in prison because she wouldn't live up to the rules. And sure enough, they found her in a motel room with 6 bunnies. I just thought to myself, doing time, sitting there in prison and saying, what do you wait for? Well, rape, robbery. I had 6 bunnies in the motel.
I'm a bunny hoarder.
That's a kind of an odd crime to do time for.
Bunnies are cute. I like bunnies.
Lenny, like of Mice and Men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, you better tell the radio audience that they can't see necessarily that you're picking.
Yeah, I was doing that for the internet crowd.
Yes,
so they had a special secret.
Did you buy the bunnies at a store or just trap them in her backyard?
I have no clue. They were a little vague on the bunny details, and I think she was too. But I don't know how you can actually get into trouble for having too many bunnies.
Well, some local jurisdictions have been interpreted. Their ordinances have been interpreted to read that unless the animal is specifically identified, dogs, cats, whatever, it is prohibited from being owned in that jurisdiction. Really? So it's very possible that wherever she was, the local jurisdiction has that prohibited reading of the
Oh.
local ordinance.
I lived in East Lansing a few decades ago, and I do remember finding out when I had a couple cats, couple dogs, that you were limited
many.
to 3. Yeah,
Too many.
I was
It's not
actually
atypical.
yeah, I didn't even know I was out of compliance.
That's why generally you cannot breed animals in the city limits of Lansing.
City of Lansing, it's 4 animals.
4 animals.
Oh, so what do you do if you have puppies?
You can have that, but you do it twice a year, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you cannot run like a dog mill or a cat mill in Lansing.
That's
But
perceived
well,
as
no, they're not cats.
Well, no, catching them
Because
you
cats
don't
are
do anything.
cats are not controlled by state law, and
Right,
therefore the animal control facilities, which are contracted by the city to do things, will not do anything about stray and feral cats. Because when the cat collectors who used to live next door to me moved and abandoned over 3 dozen very sick cats that had FIV and feline leukemia or both, it took several weeks of calls with Animal Control and the Humane Society for us to finally figure out a way to pay the Humane Society to trap all these animals and take care of them. And unfortunately, all of them had to be euthanized. I mean, they were all very, very sick. But they were also exposing all of us who lived there to all of these zoonotic illnesses, which you can't do either. So
this is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. That's one of the things that worries me when we see this sort of cutback in so many government services. Those are the kinds of things that really affect quality of life in an urban area. You may have those laws on the books, but if you don't have a well-funded animal control that has the resources to be able to deal with those issues, then you just see, there's nothing nicer than, oh boy, let's mix 103-degree temperatures, people living close to one another, barking dogs in the middle of the night and no relief for that, very little police protection,
and
throw in a little
fireworks on
alcohol
top of it.
and fireworks, and I think you have a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think the reaction was to the fireworks law?
I found the the representative who has, and he was a Democrat, much to my surprise, who had sponsored that law over the years and finally got it through. And he made the mistake of having one of those forms that you have on your webpage where you can read messages for him. You know that thing about closed-minded and disagreeable? Oh, I was disagreeable. I think that's a disastrous law.
Now, to be fair, it is the only law passed by the current Republican administration and legislature which has led to job creation. So let us be fair and acknowledge that it was a job-creating measure.
Those 2 folks who lived in a travel trailer next to their tent at the old Randy's mobile station on Okemos Road, I felt so sorry for those folks. It's 104 degrees. The fireworks were probably going to go off on their own.
I was worried about, it's
Me too.
Whoosh.
Yeah. Seriously. And some of the idiots that would drive into that parking lot, I thought, boom, right in there, there's nothing to protect. There's no building protecting those fireworks. It just seemed to me a pretty rough way to make a living.
And some of those things they were selling looked like mortars.
Is that
they were gigantic.
Yeah,
really?
The explosive power of some of those things are really, truly dangerous. And, the story about that guy who blew his privates off down in the Detroit area, I think that's telling. The fact that a Catholic church in Grand Rapids got set on fire because they were shooting explosive bottle rockets onto its roof. You put this kind of explosive power, and it doesn't even need to be that heavy. I mean, M80 is enough. Yeah. And the dry conditions that we're dealing with, and you have a recipe for disaster.
I saw several lawns today just driving around. I wasn't looking for them that were burned.
Yeah, that would surprise me.
Hay, yes. Hay caught fire.
We were pretty fortunate, I think.
The day before the burning ban came in, I live next door to a cemetery. I've not had the best relationship with the cemetery folks over the years, as you know. I had a dog that was fond of peeing in a bush there. It led to a 3-day court case. Even after I stopped the dog from going over there, the poor guy that was the sexton really was a little, he couldn't tell one dog from another. He kept thinking it was my dog and it wasn't. So we have problems. Now they do a lot of burning there. And that's one of the stranger things to me, is they set off these big bonfires and then they walk away and go do other tasks. It just seems to me amazing in this era that, it is a tinderbox out there.
You live in a wooded area.
Oh, absolutely.
Exceedingly wooded.
I know. The neighbor across the street has burn marks all over her porch from where the falling embers keep hitting her porch. And it just seems to me we really are going to have, I don't see with this level of drought that we're dealing with if we see this in upcoming years, we're not going to be doing any running around here.
Oh, I think that's accurate. I think that's absolutely accurate. And what concerns me when we start talking about the drought conditions and the heat and all of the issues that are going on here is that there are people out there who aren't getting resources to protect themselves from this drought.
Right, absolutely.
I worry about the homeless people, the at risk for homelessness people, the low income folks, the seniors who may not have access to a way to get to the cooling centers when the buses are shut down.
Yeah.
And I do worry that we continue to cut support services such that we're endangering those people's lives. And I know that makes me sound like a big Nancy liberal, but it does worry me.
There's a mystery to me that I never had solved. You remember many years ago, quite a while ago, there were 700 to 900 people who died in Chicago on a weekend from the heat.
Yes, that was in '95.
It was so bad that they were bringing in refrigerated trucks and literally stacking them like cordwood outside of the morgue. Now, in this last week of the intense heat with all the records broken, they said it was somewhere around 50 people died in Chicago. And I would like to ask you, I don't think that the city services have improved that much since 700 to 900 people in one weekend. It's almost like there had to have been something else going on.
There's actually a book. There was an interview with the author of that book on one of the NPR shows that I heard just actually last week, which is how I knew what Europe was. And it's a historian from New York who wrote the book on this. And what happened is that you had the B team basically that was running the city that had no idea how to deal with any type of emergency.
Why was it
trying to call the emergency? Because everybody was out of town on vacation for the holiday. The mayor was at his beach house. The head of public health was at the beach house. The head of public services was at work. They were all gone. They were just gone. The head of the fire marshal's unit was in Florida on some sort of conference event. So
it's like when Daryl Gates was out of town when the Rodney King riot erupted. When the leaders are gone, things do tend to get out of control pretty quickly. Because it just seemed to me there's such an astronomical difference in those numbers.
And there were other issues there as well that have since been addressed somewhat, like the failure of the critical infrastructure, the electrical grid, and that sort of stuff. There has been significant improvement to the electrical grid in Chicago, some in Detroit, some in the larger cities. New York has had phenomenal increase in its electrical grid.
They have done a better job too about just alerting at the community level. Chicago has a really strong neighborhood association group, and I think once they realized that disaster, because what they found was that elderly people were literally cooking without realizing it because they'd be in homes with their windows shut and no fan.
Yep.
And they now stop and check on them, and if necessary, get them to the cooling center and that kind of thing. They've organized that kind of neighborhood response, which is really critical.
Which is again not a city services, but a community services response.
Although when I'm looking right now, and it's very discouraging to me, Bob Turjanowicz and I did an awful lot of work with the people in the neighborhood associations in Chicago and with the Chicago Police Department. One of my very close friends over the years, Deputy Chief Leroy O'Shield, who became the chief of the public housing police in Chicago. We did magnificent work with really reforming the police department and getting it out into the neighborhoods and working with these neighborhood groups. And it's been so sad to see that all disappear. Now we're seeing these astronomical levels of youth violence return to the city. It's to the point now where there was an article yesterday in Business Insider with a woman consultant talking about how the level of violence is such that she knows people who can offer jobs there who won't come to Chicago because of the violence. And I just would hope that we would see a resurgence in understanding what really works. One of the challenges, you can do community policing sometimes without the police if you have to. The neighborhood groups like that can take over and start organizing block by block, and I think that's what it's going to take.
Well, and I think we see similar stories here in Michigan with Saginaw, with Flint, and I think the advent of state troopers, if those state troopers are trained adequately in community policing and community building training, then I think they'll be successful in addressing the crime problem. I don't know. I haven't seen what the training.
State police don't operate that way. That's not their mission. That's not their role.
Well, then they shouldn't be being brought into communities to do that.
I know, and they shouldn't. But everybody thinks that all you have to do is bring in the state police or bring in the National Guard and to solve the problem. you're actually making the wrong move.
All you do is suppress the problem and don't address it. And I've been involved in neighborhood groups for years, and I see how effective and how potentially dangerous they can be as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they can be
It depends on who gets control of them.
The whole argument over rental properties in Lansing, there was an argument over going to a moratorium on rental properties.
Right.
Turned into a those people argument.
Yes.
That somehow if you were a renter, you were less than. And I, early on, I didn't really have a position on that, but I finally came out against it. And when I made the decision to come out against it, I had actually been told that, we wanted to control those people, and that particular area of the city was pointed out where a lot of African Americans live. And that was it for me. That's when it became, this is about race. This is about controlling low-income people and people of color, and I can't participate in that. So I went down and announced my opposition to it to city council by saying, so evidently before I bought my house for the year prior to that I served on the LCC Board of Trustees, I was a raping, robbering, murdering, drug dealing renter. I'm glad I was reformed by purchasing a house.
Well, it's interesting nowadays, isn't it, that we have this move toward renters are good people now because it's the foreclosed upon homes that are the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, I don't care if somebody's renting it or owns it. Please put people in the houses in my neighborhood.
There's a trend nationwide too that younger people are renting, and they will rent their entire life because they don't want to be tied down to a house.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that
especially with the job market as it is, you have to be ready to go.
I was going to say, I think that has more to do with the job transitioning that young people go through. I mean, when you and I and Bill were in school, and I think I was probably the last edge of the generation that went through this. We could go and get a job, and that would be our job until the day we retired, and we would be. Now, it's not uncommon for the average person to go through 5 or 6.
It was my dad's generation that could do that. Even I couldn't. So I'm not sure if you had that.
Well, my father did that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was an expectation of the upper middle class.
You didn't move 3, 4, or 5 times,
no,
unless you were at the very top.
Right.
And you moved because
you had so many opportunities.
Yeah. You tend to stay where you were.
It's interesting too that I've always had this argument with educated people. They do seem to value that as a plus. I mean, for example, getting your PhD at a university, the idea is that, well, then they shouldn't hire you because you need to go to another place and work for another place before you can get a job back at that because it's so broadening for you to go elsewhere. Which seems to me to devalue community, which seems to me to be so important. The ability to put down roots, make connections, make commitments, be loyal to a place.
I think if the history of MSU or the history of U of M were written and we looked at it, we would find that were it not for the stabilizing factor of people staying from their introduction to those communities, they would not be communities.
I know. Transience is not really a positive.
No, I think it's part of the bowling alone syndrome that we're dealing with.
It seems a little tad sociopathic to me, but that's just because I'm close-minded and disagreeable.
That's right. I was going to say, and you're bringing it back around.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about before I forget, the other thing I want to forget is that this is WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, LCC radio. One of the things we were going to talk about was that Supreme Court decision has implications for HIV coverage for people, and there's also, you said you were going to give us an update on a new UN report as well today?
Sure, a couple of things. First of all, talking on the Affordable Care Act, the good thing is that it's going to make access to care more readily available to people living with HIV who know it. The other thing it does is it makes HIV testing considered preventative care and therefore a no-cost thing. So it should be normalized as part of care. I mean, now, honestly, it should have been normalized as part of care since 2006, but now there's even less of a disincentive for doctors to say, no, we don't want to do that. So hopefully this will become part of the routine in the doctor's office is, it's time for your HIV test. The CDC recommends that everybody ages 13 to 64 get tested annually for HIV. Period. Everybody.
Yeah.
They don't say in risk groups or they just say everybody. And I think that's actually a good thing.
And what are the stats on the number of people walking around with the disease of HIV?
1 in 5 people who are infected do not know that they have the disease. So about 20% of Americans infected with the virus.
Which would be how many people?
Well, we know that there are about 1.5 million people who've been identified by this. So that would make what, another 250,000 people living without the virus. You know, and when we look at that context, that sort of nationally, when we look at communities that are particularly overburdened, such as Detroit, where we see a prevalence rate that's 3 times the national average at 1.88% versus 0.06%, you see there that the statistical chances of becoming exposed to HIV go through the roof, as well as other STIs, and we're seeing that more and more across the country. So I think that that's really important. And in the gay community, 1 in 5 gay or bisexual men in 21 cities is HIV positive. 44% of those don't know it. That's a horrifying number, particularly when you start talking about the number of young gay and bisexual men who are engaging in unprotected sex.
Yeah.
The eroticization of barebacking or unprotected sex has become, I think, one of the biggest public health threats to the gay community. That's not to say that I don't think that barebacking has its importance as a cultural icon. I think that we haven't done the community dialogues about it and about what it means.
Well, just from a sheer cost standpoint, you know, when I was talking with you and discovering that HIV meds per year can average about $40,000.
Mine have dropped, by the way.
Oh, really?
It's now only $38,000.
Oh, wow, what a bargain!
Yeah, it's $2,000. That's
fire sale. What's going on?
But I mean, when you're looking at that kind of just the cost outlay and the healthcare cost, it would seem that it's so much in our societal. We keep talking about trying to reduce these costs. That's an easy way to start doing that.
Sure. That's one way. I think also there are some new studies that have come out recently on behavior and risk behavior and its effectiveness in preventing transmission. Mm-hmm. And intellectually, we would think that using a condom would be one of the most effective interventions after monogamy. It's actually one of the least effective interventions.
Really?
We would think intellectually that saying, I'll only sleep with somebody who has the same serostatus as I, so negative with negative and positive with positive, you would think intellectually that would work. That's actually the least effective. And that goes back to that 44% of people who are infected with the virus don't know.
Don't know it. Yeah.
What has been found to be almost as effective as monogamy is seropositioning, which is choosing which sexual position to engage in based on the known or unknown status of your partner. So if somebody's positive or you don't know, you treat them as positive. And that goes back sort of to the argument of universal precautions that about 1997 we stopped using as a prevention method.
When the medications came in.
When the medications came in, there was sort of this condom fatigue. Nobody wanted to hear about condoms anymore. Right. They wanted to hear about the medications and the Lazarus effect and everything's fabulous and you just take a pill and everything's great. And la 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 la, Dorothy, and everybody's back in Kansas. Well, unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, obviously. And it also shifted into a disease burden in the African American community, in part because it was easy to ignore it because it was a disempowered community and a poor community that didn't have the political power to rise up the way white middle-class gay men.
One of the sadder things, too, I thought recently was in the whole healthcare debate, I was discouraged to see so many of the black ministers come out and be so homophobic in their response to a lot of the issues that surfaced. That's not a good situation. I think that contributes to the problem of that being an underground problem in the community.
Well, I don't think it's quite as underground as folks would like to believe it is. That happens to be one of the areas that I'm researching for my book right now. I think that sexuality is far more open and fluid in the African American community. They just don't talk about it. People know, but they don't talk about it. Yeah. The other thing that we're finding is that because men are a limited commodity in the African American community, disease blame becomes easier for the other woman. So if he's sleeping with 2 women, the 2 women blame each other for the HIV infection and not the man, regardless of what the scenario is. There's some interesting dynamics that are beginning to show up in.
Is there much research being done?
There is some. There's not enough, but there is some being done.
What did the UN report?
Well,
reveal today?
This is an 18-month-long report. They've been going for 18 months. It was chaired by the former president of Brazil. It's called the UN Commission on HIV and the Law. And they came out and they recommended the elimination of HIV-specific criminal laws. In fact, they said that the creation and advent and promotion of those laws was a violation of the fundamental framework of human rights, which is an amazing statement from any government body, let alone the UN. They also recommended the decriminalization of consensual voluntary prostitution.
Paid sex.
That should be that's somebody
Consenting
should be able
adults.
to consenting adults should be able to enter into that contract, and that it's contractual human right, which is an interesting recommendation. They also ended a shift in the dynamic in the war on drugs. They're recommending the decriminalization of possession of personal use illicit drugs. They cited Portugal as a perfect example of that. They're also recommending sterile needles in prisons be made available for injection drug users who are prisoners, and condoms, which are not made available right now. And they cited some studies in Switzerland, actually, believe it or not, where they've made sterile needles available and they've reduced the incidence of sharing to 0.
And I'm sure that report is being burned across the country as we speak.
It was very interesting calling the White House and administration sources today. You need to talk to this person. Here's their main number. Good luck getting through the phone tree. The White House did not want to talk.
Long waits.
They did not want to talk. And I emailed the governor's office because one of the recommendations is that people who've been convicted of HIV, non-disclosure, exposure, and or transmission laws, Michigan has at least 60 cases that we know of, that they should be immediately pardoned. So I reached out to the governor's office, and God bless Geraldine Lasher through Facebook this afternoon. She very politely declined to comment. And her comment is we expect the Michigan Department of Community Health to thoroughly review this and identify how these recommendations and these human rights issues apply to Michigan, and make recommendations to the governor, and the governor will act on it.
The governor is looking a little better these days, I think, since his recent move to veto the voting suppression bills that came to his desk.
Absolutely. I think it has moved him a little bit away from looking like I think Tim Skubik said it when he said, "Don't send me that, it's not on my agenda, but if you send it to me, I'll sign it."
Yeah,
Looked like a lapdog.
yes.
And I think he's moved away from that.
I wonder why. Does anybody know why? Was there something that...
Is this a John Roberts question?
That's what I wondered
Yeah.
about. How cynical should I be? Is this, well, I'll do this once and then I don't have to do it for a year?
No, I hear that there were a couple of issues going into this, depending on which sort of political frame you're coming from.
Yeah.
One was that he just truly did not believe that the laws were appropriate.
They aren't, but I mean, that never stopped most of the other governors from signing.
But as much as it's fun to beat up on Rick Snyder, I do think he's a pragmatist. And I think
That's the exact word I was going to use. He's pragmatic.
But how is this in his enlightened self-interest?
Because I also think that he's fundamentally about being fair.
I also think he doesn't like clumsy things.
And these were clumsy laws. There's no question about that. These were clumsy
What I
attempts
remember
to
of
cut
him, he
people
doesn't
out.
like clumsy stuff.
Yes.
So I'm not sure he
much
got
of the
into a
legislation-
philosophical.
Look at the abortion legislation and all the rest of it. This stuff is all clumsy. I'm surprised, though, that he picked the one that actually, it seems to me that the people that really run the GOP would care more about that voting legislation than almost anything else.
But
The red meat social issues appeal to the base, but they're already rabid. They're excited.
But the
about
money
it.
people are
They really care about these voting rights.
But I think that that was in a way a slap in the face to that establishment, to the money establishment that opposed the DRIC.
Yeah.
They opposed his bridge. So he went to Canada. He signed the deal with Canada.
Now
it makes sense.
It makes more sense.
And it comes back. I mean, I
the
think
bridge
that
boys got punished.
I think that was
this
part
was
of
a
it.
jab in the eye to the bridge boys.
This was a slap to the Matty Maroons.
Matty Maroon.
That could
to
be.
the Matty Maroon wing of the party.
Yeah.
But I do sincerely believe that there was a sense of pragmatism and fair play from this governor.
But I always like the cynical reason.
Yes, I know. That's because you're closed-minded.
Exactly.
And
Disagreeable.
But I do. I mean, I honestly think that this governor is not as evil as we would like to think he is.
He looked. That made him look good.
It sure
I just
did.
wish we could find the same sort of way into his psyche to energize him on issues that I also care about.
Well, and I pointed this out to Bill before we went on air. He did do this with domestic partner benefits
Ah, okay.
because he vetoed the bill that would have made it illegal for universities to operate.
Yeah.
And he did it because he said it was unconstitutional. The same reason that he used for vetoing these bills. I do think that fundamentally this governor has a belief in the Constitution about what is and isn't permissible, and that is guiding some of these decisions. And I think we see that with some of these really
And next
controversial
year,
vetoes.
if things go right, I think we can make him a Democrat. Because I don't think his party's going to want him for very much longer.
No, I don't
let's
think
circle back to the Manny situation.
Matty Maroon.
Do you think that was an eye opener for the governor?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was a governor
insane this guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is a governor who came in. Frankly, he'd gotten a good deal from the Canadians to get the money, and he then went.
If we got a better deal, I don't know what it would be.
And then he went to the federal government, and the federal government said, "Yes, we'll use that as matching money to give you even more federal money for transportation dollars." And his own party said no. And I think it was an eye opener for him about how even the best laid plans can die on the sword of ideology.
Oh,
and I think that drove him nuts. I mean, I don't think he's fundamentally the same kind of ideologist that we see in James Bolger or Randy Richardville or Rick Jones. I truly think he's a pragmatist.
Yeah.
I think he's a Republican because that's the fiscal view that he sees of the world.
Well, he's in that sort of militant mold.
Yes.
And they ran the state for many years, so he grew up with that tradition.
Correct. So I do think that was an utter surprise to him. I mean, and let's be honest, when he announced the deal, we were all stunned. I mean, nobody was expecting it. It was probably one of the best kept secrets in politics in the last 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an utterly
initially, I thought this is just gonna fly. I mean, there's no downside to having no cost to building a bridge. Right. And then we forgot about Mr.
Maroon and his millions of dollars.
A bridge.
It's funny though that periodically on the news channels they'll play the ads on both sides of that issue back to back. It's funny to watch them together. I mean, it's sort of these people going in the middle. What? What? What's going on?
But I do think that Snyder, said screw you to the Republican leadership in the legislature.
He did.
And went over to Canada and made a hell of a deal. I mean, the new bridge deal is a big deal.
The new bridge deal is even a better deal.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want him to keep negotiating like this.
And yet they're still fighting him on that.
Yeah.
Although, to their credit, Brian Kelly, who is a Republican ideologue, who has been in the governor's column on this one from day one.
That's why I keep wishing the governor good health.
Yeah, no kidding. Actually said when this whole thing came out, this new deal on the bridge came out, and Brian Kelly actually said, well, I hope the Maroons will bid on running this bridge because they know how to run a bridge. That's actually pretty pragmatic, particularly coming from someone like Brian Kelly, who's more of the partisan sledgehammer than.
Although I must admit, can I ask a question? How hard is it to run a bridge?
Have you ever been to Bay City? No. They have 3 bridges. They never work. I mean, there's always something wrong with one of them. Of course, they open and close. So.
But I mean, I think that there is some complication in terms of how do you figure out when to do maintenance on it.
I think it's a lot. I mean, think about running the Mackinac Bridge. System?
I mean, how come it goes from point A to point B?
I think there is some complexity involved in running a bridge. Just to be fair, I mean, I know you're closed-minded and disagreeable.
Yeah, I know.
But you gotta first figure out how do you take the toll.
See, I guess that's the only part that really matters, isn't it? If you're in that kind of business, it's can you really get the money from the tolls?
So I do think that the bridge has. I think it's been brilliantly played by Schneider from the beginning.
Plus Snyder took him to task for not completing that one access road. And it's finished now. They
waited so long.
They took it away from him, and the state took it away from him and finished it. Darn quick.
Yeah. I mean, it's finally happened.
It's amazing what happens when the government does it.
Well, we will have, we don't have enough time now to. How many times have you visited where we were going to talk Enbridge, and we now have to table that motion to the
Lots
next
of
time?
them.
Lots of times.
Well, hopefully next time I come in, we'll actually have more information than just the find that PIMSA is recommending.
Well, that will be the next visit. We've got to get you back soon to talk about what's going on there. That's a very interesting situation. I had hoped to get to LIBOR Gate, that is the Barclays Bank extravaganza, but we will. And we were hoping also to do a little recap on Common Ground, but people are just sort of baking out there now. Made it hard for us to park, but that's all right. But we will see everybody next Monday night back here at Lansing Online News Radio, LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. That was fun.